Welcome to The Explainer. Take a second and just think about the true meaning of wealth. I mean, in our modern world, we're literally bombarded with images of what success is supposed to look like, right? Big houses, shiny new cars, the absolute latest tech in our pockets. But what if the exact things we buy to look wealthy are actually the very things keeping us completely trapped? Today, we're unpacking the fascinating story of a guy who looked at the modern debt machine, saw it for the trap it really is, and just decided to play by a completely different set of rules.
Section 1. The Cycle of Payments. Trading Time for Things. Okay, let's dive into this, because to really get our subject today, we first have to understand the status quo of modern life. You know, for most people, the American dream has quietly morphed into this endless treadmill of monthly obligations. We aren't really focused on building actual wealth or buying freedom anymore. Instead, the whole focus is shifted to just managing payments. We're trading the literal hours of our lives to acquire stuff, and in the process, locking ourselves into a cycle that is incredibly tough to escape.
Just look at this number, 99%. According to the research we're exploring today, 99% of people will spend most of their adult lives making payments. I mean, just pause and think about the sheer scale of that. The vast majority of us are spending our most energetic, productive years, not building a financial fortress, but just servicing debt. We're watching our hard-earned money march right out the door as fast as it comes in, month after agonizing month.
And what exactly are we making all these payments on? Well, it's an endless list, isn't it? A payment for that car sitting in the driveway. A payment for the house that, let's be honest, we barely have time to enjoy because we're always at work paying for it. A payment for that perfect showroom furniture, or even vacations we couldn't actually afford. We're essentially financing a version of success designed by someone else. And here's why this is absolutely crucial. By the time we finally own all this borrowed stuff, we've traded away the one thing we can literally never earn back: our time.
Section 2. The Anomaly. Meet David Carter. So, in a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio, there lived a true anomaly. A guy who looked at that 99% and opted out entirely. From the outside, David was painfully ordinary. No flashy suits, no guru vibes. He lived quietly, didn't flaunt a thing, and completely rejected that intense societal pressure to keep up appearances.
And this brilliantly illustrates the massive gap between what society views as success and how David actually lived his life. On one side, we've got the standard playbook. Successful people lease luxury SUVs, upgrade their phones every year, remodel kitchens they barely even cook in, right? But now, look at David's side. He drove the exact same dark green pickup truck for nearly 23 years. He mowed his own lawn every Saturday, packed his lunch instead of eating out, or faded jeans, and spent his Friday nights reading financial statements instead of watching TV. Actually, some neighbors flat out assumed he was struggling financially, or just lacked ambition.
But because David skipped all the flashy stuff, almost nobody understood what was really going on. They couldn't see the reality hiding behind those faded jeans and that old truck. While everyone else around him was borrowing money up to their eyeballs to look successful, David was quietly becoming free. And the magnitude of this freedom, it's truly staggering. By age 58, David owned every single thing in his life outright. Just look at this list: his home, his vehicles, a small warehouse, his investments, even a tiny fishing cabin a couple hours away. There wasn't a single bank in America that could claim a piece of his life. Zero mortgages, zero car payments, zero credit card balances, zero personal loans. The whole shebang was his. Naturally, people eventually noticed and started calling him lucky. Because, calling someone lucky is way easier than asking the uncomfortable question of whether they just made more disciplined choices. But let me tell you, luck had absolutely zero to do with David Carter's life.
Section 3. The Sound of Debt. 45 years earlier. To really understand David, we have to transition away from his adult life and travel back in time. This whole philosophy didn't start with some trendy finance book or a clever investment strategy. It started almost 45 years earlier, long before banks were stuffing our mailboxes with pre-approved credit cards, and way before social media convinced millions that looking rich mattered more than actually being rich.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds across his life. We see him at age 58 with total financial freedom. But if we trace that line back 45 years, we find a 10-year-old boy in a small white house. And in this house, money was never, ever discussed. It was only worried about. That right there is the exact origin of his entire worldview.
David was 10 years old when he learned what debt actually sounds like. And spoiler alert,
It wasn't numbers or contracts or interest rates. Debt sounded like whispered arguments after midnight. It sounded like his mom crying quietly in the kitchen over yet another due payment. It was his dad staring silently at unopened bills spread across the dining room table. Every single month, it was the exact same routine. The bills arrived, the stress arrived, the arguments arrived, and eventually, the silence arrived. Listen, kids might not grasp compound interest, but they deeply understand fear. And David learned to recognize that fear on his dad's face every time the phone rang after dinner.
The really heartbreaking part here? His parents weren't lazy or irresponsible. Not at all. His dad worked overtime whenever he humanly could, and his mom cleaned offices at night after spending all day raising 3 kids. They worked harder than almost anyone David would ever meet in his entire life. But the brutal reality of the math is that hard work simply couldn't outrun bad financial decisions made years earlier.
Let's visually stack up these decisions, because debt doesn't usually crush you overnight, right? It steals your joy one tiny piece at a time. For David's parents, it started with step 1, a simple truck loan. Then step 2, a couple of credit cards. Step 3 brought unexpected medical bills after an accident. And finally, step 4, a refinanced mortgage to try and cover it all. Individually, every single payment probably looked totally manageable when they signed the papers. But stacked together, they morphed into an inescapable prison. It meant canceled vacations, birthdays celebrated with apologies instead of presents, and Christmases overshadowed by a quiet, gnawing anxiety. The furniture was the same, the house was the same, but the family inside had changed forever.
Section 4. The Illusion of Ownership. An Unforgettable Night. This brings us to the real emotional climax of David's childhood. It was just an ordinary evening. 10-year-old David was at the kitchen table, pretending to finish his homework while his parents talked nearby. He was quietly listening, noticing how every single adult conversation somehow always circled back to money. Not dreams, not future plans, always money.
And on this unforgettable night, his father just looked completely exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally drained. He rubbed his forehead, and David overheard him say something that would literally alter the course of his life. His dad quietly said, "I don't feel like I own this house anymore." His mother looked down and just agreed, "You don't." And then they just sat there, in complete silence, for almost a full minute.
Finally, his father whispered words that would echo inside David's mind for decades to come. The bank owns everything. I mean, just sit with the weight of that realization landing on a 10-year-old kid.
So, the crucial point is how this completely shattered a child's understanding of the world. At 10, David obviously didn't grasp the mechanics of a mortgage, but he definitely understood ownership. He understood his bicycles, his baseball gloves, his books, things that actually belonged to someone. And suddenly, for the very first time, it clicked. Adults could spend their entire lives living inside houses that didn't actually belong to them. They were just renting them from the bank, piece by agonizing piece. Honestly, that thought terrified young David more than any ghost story ever could.
Section 5. A Promise of Freedom, a Lifelong Legacy. Because he realized if the bank owned the house, then what on earth were his parents spending their entire lives working for? That terrifying thought stuck with him long after the kitchen lights clicked off that night. It stayed with him long after the arguments stopped and long after childhood ended. It essentially became the absolute bedrock of his adult life.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast it presents about legacy. Most children inherit family traditions, right? Recipes, photo albums, a specific way of celebrating the holidays. But David inherited a question born directly out of his parents' financial trap. And as he grew up, that question morphed from a childhood fear into a fierce, lifelong promise to himself, a promise that he would never let a bank own his time, his joy, or his life.
Which brings us right back to the profound question David asked himself as a boy. And it's the question I want to leave you with today. Look at your own life. Look at your monthly payments, the things you trade your precious time for. What exactly are you spending your life working for?